welcome back to Any Color You Like, a podcast where we spill our feelings, opinions, and give some great advice to 20 somethings everywhere. We're your hosts, Kritvi and Mahima, and if you can't really see from our faces, we're so excited to have Leeza Mangaldas in conversation with us, who is an author, podcaster, and literal queen of sex positive communication. So thank you, Leeza, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. You are too kind. Too kind. Thank you.
Lisa, you have been creating sex positive content for I think about 5 to 6 years now, and you've spoken a lot about your journey. But my first question to you has to be, how did that first conversation go when you had to go and tell your parents, like, hey, listen, mom and dad, I'm going to be talking about sex on the internet? Because Mahima and I, while doing this episode, we're like, you know what? All the sisters and the friends are going to really love it. But when my dad sees this on the YouTube suggestion channel, it's going to be a bit awkward. So can you talk a little bit about how that happened and how you made that move?
So I really lucked out in the parents department. My parents are really supportive of this and always have been. Or rather, they never had to be convinced that sex education matters or that, people would benefit from easy access to this information. So luckily it was never even a thing. Like I think actually more than my parents, it was overcoming my own sense of like what will other people think,
Right.
particularly approaching some particular like topics that are especially taboo. Like I don't know. I think the first time I talked about, masturbation for women or using a sex toy, I think we're like still such a heteronormative society as well in terms of if you're going to talk about sex, like the only acceptable type of sex is like penetrative intercourse, right? If you talk about
Right.
cunnilingus or rimming or something, there's like an added layer of, she's that kind of, you know what I mean? I feel like, and I don't give a shit really what other people think today, but I think it was a journey to getting to a point where you give less and less and less of a shit about, how you're going to be perceived as this like bad girl or something, because who the hell gets to define that anyway? But I would be
Right.
lying to say it never occurred to me that I could be perceived in certain ways. You know what I mean? But I never really cared about it, but now I care even less about it.
That's so awesome. So do you think that there's a potential to normalize talking about sex amongst Desi parents? Because that is one of the major questions that, is asked amongst our age group. Like, can we actually get to a point where Desi parents are open to having these conversations like, your parents are?
I think that, Desi parents were once teenagers also, right? It's
Right.
so funny that we literally become the uncles and aunties that we so despise for judging us when we're younger. Suddenly you're a
Right.
parent and you have kids, and suddenly the same things you wished like the elders in your community or whatever hadn't tried to impose on you, you end up imposing on your kid. It's so funny how that happens. Um, and I think we should be conscious of that. Like, why keep perpetuating the same stigmas, the same prejudices, the same restrictions that are often very gender unequal, often very queer phobic, often very misogynistic, patriarchal, etc.,
Mhm.
etc. Because I mean, if we're honest, like nobody perfectly conforms to all of what, polite society considers like appropriate, like whatever, like
Right.
this like perfectly sanskari where you literally like don't have sex before and what is that anyway, like what is this box, do we even want to fit into this box? So I think parent there's a big I think it's such a fear of log kya kahenge. I actually think many of
Right.
our parents would be much more progressive if they were less invested in what the neighbors think. It's like they don't even care what they actually feel about an issue. It's more like, how does the rest of society expect me to feel about this issue? Community is a wonderful aspect of South Asian society. When you're sick, like 50
Hmm.
people will show up with food for you, and that's beautiful. But
Right.
they also meddle with your business and like wanna, judge and kind of uphold some status quo that's unnecessary. So I think we should
Right.
keep the good bits and maybe also be more compassionate with each other, right? And less judging.
So, okay, to be very honest, I think I started this podcast and I told Mahima, I said one of the first things I want to talk about is the female orgasm, because even though me, myself, and so many of my friends who are sexually active, very sexually aware, are still not having fulfilling and satisfying कहते हैं ना पलंग तोड़ sex. There is still something that stops them from really tapping into that orgasmic peak, or so many times I just hear like, no, it's fine, मुझे ऐसे ही मजे आ जाते हैं. So we've been thinking a lot about where this orgasm gap comes from, and my thought has always been that, when men were younger and boys were younger, they were busy fapping away their teens. They were allowed to do these things. They saw in pop culture that these things were very normalized. Whereas I think as women, we grew up a lot of the time just kind of being ashamed of our changing bodies, not really understanding what to do with our changing bodies. So never looking at our bodies in a more sexy, sexualized way. That's just my thought though. So I kind of want your thoughts on where do you think this like gap begins from? Is it something that happens in our childhood, or where does that develop?
I mean, I think that so unfortunately, shame tends to be, I think, the dominant lens via which sexuality is presented to all young people, regardless of gender, especially in our society. But there's a sense that this is a shameful thing, but men should do it. And this is a shameful thing, but women should not do it. Right? So women should be the gatekeepers and men should be the predators. And but it is a shameful thing nonetheless. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like which messes people up on both sides, because on the one hand you socialize one gender to kind of seek out this thing, but it's a bad and shameful thing, but boys will be boys and you should go do this. And on
Mm.
the other hand, you're telling another gender that, this is a really shameful thing and good girls don't do it, and like you lose something if you give this to someone. So we both have, like, I mean, people of both these two genders, which tend to be the paradigm within which most young people are raised to identify as, right? You have to kind of fight this paradigm if you identify outside of it. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
we, as very young people, before we have a solid sense of like who we are, we kind of inherit these ideas already, right? That there's only these two genders and that men should want it and women should protect it. And I think that in a funny kind of way, it produces like double the problems, right? This dual conditioning. Because on the one hand, I mean, we rarely learn anything about women's pleasure. We basically, if we learn anything at all around female reproductive anatomy, right? It's called reproductive anatomy. There is no mention of pleasure. You see a uterus
Mm-hmm.
and fallopian tubes and ovaries or something. When did we ever see a diagram with the clitoris labeled in school, right? But you do get it just if you get that chapter in biology class or whatever, the reproductive system, you do get the penis and the testes and this mention of erection, penetration, ejaculation, because those processes happen to be central to reproduction. So somehow men's pleasure seems legitimized and necessary, very important, right? The cornerstone of sex equals heterosexual intercourse, sex equals a penis and a vagina, sex must end in ejaculation, and hopefully you have a baby. Like that's basically the message we get, right? Don't do it before marriage, etc., etc. And so I think that when it comes to women exploring their own bodies, like that's something we're never encouraged. We're not even meant to really see our bodies as our bodies. It's almost like this um, thing that doesn't really belong to you, that your family must safeguard until it then belongs to your husband. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
the even though this sounds so Stone Age like, or so like I don't know, caveman like, that is in some ways still the undertone of how young women are raised to feel about themselves, right? And I think that on the other hand, there's this pressure, especially today with internet porn and things like that. Perhaps that's even more so. Where with men, it's like a sign of masculinity if you like do it a lot, do it with lots of people. And some men might not want to also, So I think the pressure to have sex, or the pressure to not have sex, the pressure to like be sexual or not be sexual, it shouldn't be a pressure. It should really be a process of discovery on your own terms, right? And I think so. We do ourselves a disservice by sort of um, characterizing masculinity in the way of like the player is like, the cool dude is someone who gets a lot of women, who knows a lot about like who like fucks a lot, basically, right? And like the
Right.
respectable girl is like this virgin and very
With
pure
her
and docile,
flower.
and right. So it's like it's all messed up. And I think men will write to me so much about like how ashamed they feel about masturbating, or fearing all kinds of bad things will happen to them. And like many women will write to me being, I've never masturbated. And It's so strange, right? Like nobody's actually, very rarely do I get joyful stories of like, I've always enjoyed doing this. It's a wonderful way of discovering my body. It's more like either how do I overcome this shame or how do I even start? I didn't even know we were allowed. And many people then write into me being like, you know, having read your book or watching certain videos about masturbation as a tool of self-discovery, et cetera, et cetera. It's made me understand my body better. But I think like we all have some dismantling to do, and I definitely did too. You know, where like just seeing your body as your own and seeing self pleasure is not shameful, understanding the anatomy as well, because I think many of us still think that like penetrative movements or movements that simulate that, like the main thing that you should be doing, when actually a variety of different things can, even non-genital body parts can feel wonderful when stimulated. So
Mhm.
yeah, I feel like this most of what we were taught was just like nonsense, and we need to
Unlearn
like
it.
move and learn it, and then like relearn new stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the most stupid thing I've been told by one of the guys I was dating was that, Mahima, women should not have multiple partners because their body remembers it, your muscle memory remembers it, and because the dick is going inside you. But men can have multiple partners because the dick is not going in. And I dated that guy. Oh my God.
Oh
It
man.
was it was horrible. And in all these things are coming from all like he follows all these gurus and stuff. Like I was like, please stop, please stop. Like just stop. I don't want to even talk about.
And these
Yeah.
very misogynistic ideas that like the vagina becomes loose if you have sex. And it's so funny. It's like if you have sex with 100 men, you'll have this loose vagina. But if you have
Mhm.
100 times, if you have sex with your husband 100 times, it's fine, you
It's fine.
know?
No, not okay.
Yeah.
So, piggybacking on that question, I think the first simple question that I get asked a lot, especially from younger girls, is that why should we women orgasm? Like, why should we be doing it? Should it be coming through just sexual encounters, or you should learn to self-pleasure yourself? Like, what are we getting out of it apart from that, like, momentary feel-good feeling?
Look, there's no pressure to do anything, right? I feel like while there's so much shame and stigma around being sexual, and I try really hard with my work to help dismantle the shame around women's sexuality, there's also, conversely, invisibilization and stigma around asexuality, right? It's like we never hear about that either. And
Mm.
that's absurd, right? I mean, the whole thing is agency and autonomy. There's just so much stigma around it that many people who do want to explore these things feel that they can't, and we're trying to dismantle that as well. So I just want to say basically there's no pressure to, you don't have to have an orgasm because I'm telling you to have an orgasm. Like that's not what I'm trying to do at all. But I think you know, women's pleasure has been sort of marginalized and dismissed for so long, particularly in heterosexual relationships, where it's just like, you know, her pleasure is too complicated, it's mysterious, who knows, it takes too long, like whatever.
Mhm.
Sex ends when he comes, right? And so, like globally, when research studies have been conducted around what is called orgasm equality, straight women are the least likely to be able to report frequently or always having an orgasm during sex as compared to straight men, gay men, and lesbian women, right? And so, what does this reveal? Not that women's bodies are complicated, because how come lesbians seem to be able to report that the sex is pretty satisfying, right? What it reveals is that the scripts we're fed for what heterosexual sex should look like devalue or don't sufficiently prioritize women's pleasure, right? And if we don't,
Mhm.
I mean, Laurie Mintz, who's this wonderful author who wrote a book called Becoming Cliterate, said that, you know, in the very language that we talk about sex, if we prioritized women's pleasure the way we prioritize men's pleasure, then, you know, we wouldn't be calling the clitoral caressing foreplay, right? That would be called
Right.
sex. Like clitoral stimulation is literally the most reliable route to orgasm for most women, and it's relegated to the realm of the optional. It's like foreplay, if you like. You know
Right.
what I mean? The main event is penetration. Why is that, right? She says, like, you know, clitoral stimulation would be called sex, and penetration would be called post play if we
Mhm.
prioritized if we prioritized women's pleasure the way we prioritize men's, in the way that straight people are sort of given this template for what sex should look like. So, you know, why not? sort of just unpack that stuff, I think that it's not that you have to pressure yourself to experience orgasm. I mean, many people take a long time to figure out their own pleasure, and you shouldn't feel ashamed or something if you haven't figured it out yet, or if you don't yet know what makes you orgasm. But I think it's worth being cognizant of how women's pleasure has been sort of like marginalized in the way that
Mm-hmm.
sex is presented for so many decades, and that's why it can seem so complicated and difficult, even when actually it isn't. I mean, many people use a vibrator for the first time and are just absolutely shocked that like you come every time in a few minutes, very easily. For men, that was my experience too, and it's just like, what? I thought like my orgasms were like the abominable snowman or something. Not even sure if it exists. Where is it? And it's so easy. It's just all, it's not mysterious or difficult at all. And it's like incredible. I mean, also, I think like that feeling of pleasure is one of the most euphoric things in the world, or can be, right? It can be. So why not feel entitled to it if you do want it? Like, I just think men feel entitled to pleasure in a way that women don't usually feel. We kind of are so conditioned to make our pleasure an optional thing that we don't even, I think we don't think that like we deserve it. Like it's okay if it doesn't happen. Whereas like
Right.
why not, if you do enjoy the experience, you can even provide that experience to yourself or direct your partner experiences in such a way that it is likely that they will be pleasurable for you too. Like why not close that orgasm gap, right?
Mhm.
Because
Right.
arguably many of us would like to be experiencing pleasure, but aren't always experiencing as much of it as we want. So it's more in
Yeah.
that regard as opposed to like this pressure to orgasm.
No, what you said was so interesting because it is very true that boys' pleasure is prioritized. And I was just telling Mahima about it that you know how, like, when you're in this sexual interaction with boys, at least this is what we've heard across the board. It's like the boy deserves and needs a blowjob. Like, there is no way that this sexual interaction can go beyond foreplay unless you go down on this guy. And interestingly, 99% of my friends have never had a guy willingly go down on them. And it's such an interesting thing to see that it's so far apart. And when we are in serious relationships, even when we've been with men for long periods of time, it's so difficult to get them to do what we want them to do in bed. So how might we tackle some of those issues?
Um, I mean, I think people, unfortunately, often find it hard to talk about sex, even if they are having sex. Like, I would hear from people who, maybe have been married for 10 years or something like that. And, often women will write to me being like, I've never had an orgasm with my husband. We have two kids, but I don't know how to tell him. Like, I don't know, how can I tell him this? So how do we even begin to talk about it? The lights are off and we just like do stuff. I look at the ceiling fan, that type of thing, where even this person who's supposed to be like, who is being in this very intimate act with you for years, it's something you've never actually talked about. It's funny, like we do it, but we don't talk about it. That's basically our philosophy over here when it comes to how we address sex, right? We're a country of 1.4 billion people, but we don't talk about, we like pretend we don't have sex. So I think for starters, communication, like I think while like, of course there might be some uh, people who are, um, selfish or like uninterested in pleasing their partner. I think there's also a lot of people who would really like to please their partner, but don't really know much, don't know any better. Like nobody's told them. Their partner hasn't said to them, "Do this to me. This is what I'd like." So they just do what they enjoy. I
Hmm.
think there are lots of, and also, I mean, the flip side of like constructions of masculinity or whatever is like, being good in bed makes you like a more masculine man. So I don't know if that's
Hmm.
driving people or whether it's like a genuine sort of like desire for a more equal relationship. But I do get messages a lot of the time from men being like, I want to please my partner, I really do, but I don't know how. Or my partner's too shy to tell me. Or like, I want to go down on my girl, but she doesn't let me because she like tells me she worries how it'll taste or smell or whatever. So I think and I can relate to that too,
Yeah.
where I think often when someone's going down on me, I do worry, like, oh my God, is it like, I hope he's okay. I don't think someone's worrying, like, is she okay while she's giving, do you know
Exactly.
what I mean? I just don't think that
They
they're
just go
worrying if
like,
I'm okay when they're like so happy. Like, yes, they're just like wholeheartedly enjoying the experience. Maybe there's some men who
yeah,
worry, but I would say overwhelmingly, men
yeah.
tend to be able to wholeheartedly enjoy a blowjob, whereas very often women tend to worry about whether he's okay with the taste,
Mhm.
smell, and aesthetics of what's going on down there instead of being like, yes, this feels amazing. So I feel like dismantling that sense of disgust that we've been conditioned to feel around our own vulvas is very important. And then learning how it feels good for yourself so you can then communicate that to a partner is also very good because sometimes what's working for you is something you yourself don't entirely know. So even though you know what
Right.
he's doing is not working for you, you don't know what to tell him to do. So you're
Mhm.
just like, okay, I'm just gonna fake it. I think that
Yeah.
can be a very common experience where you know this isn't happening. It's like no orgasms on the menu tonight, but you're not quite sure how to like tell him what to do or whatever, right? So I
Right.
think that
Right.
in that regard, it can be really, it can build your confidence to communicate if you really know what like works for you. And yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, like the vulva is often coded in disgust, and so I think both men and women often think like this is this dirty, smelly thing that like we need to wax
Hmm.
and for like perfume and I don't know, do all sorts of things to before anyone will like get their mouth close to it. But that's bullshit, man. It's the vulva is beautiful and it's supposed to smell like a vulva. It's not supposed to smell like roses. You're not supposed to put perfume into
Mhm.
your vagina. That's like not good for the
Yeah.
ecosystem. And so I think like getting over a score, I think of course basic personal hygiene is great and all parties, right? It's not like the penis is like some like ice lolly just waiting to
With
right.
cherries,
It
no.
would be nice if they it's nice for all parties to like have a shower. That's basic courtesy, right? Have a shower, wipe after, and like do your best to have good personal hygiene. But the body is the body, and I feel like getting over your squeamishness around the body in its natural state and kind of like being like recognizing body hair is normal, recognizing that like genitals are unlikely to smell like strawberries or roses. You don't even, they shouldn't, right? Like skin has its own, even right out of the shower, your body has its own like, but it's kind of scent, and it's actually quite a nice scent when it's right out of the shower. I feel like it's quite a yummy scent. Like I want to like smell my partner's neck or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think I don't know, overcoming some of that um sort of shame and disgust can go a long way because
Right.
I think society like works really hard at hammering it in, and then we don't realize how much work it takes to unlearn that.
Right.
And I think I was 26 years old when I read in your book for the first time that you're not supposed to use a lot of like fragrances or different soaps and stuff to clean your vagina. Because I used to do that. And in your book, you go over how like it's just not going to help because it's going to, create more problems and like more bacterial contamination, which is like because I would do it a lot. There are all these products in the shops which are very targeted towards women's vagina smelling like flowers, but I don't see that for
Hmm.
men. So
And
Yeah,
she's
I
a
mean this whole
scientist,
thing.
and yeah.
and I'm a scientist, yeah. And your book was like epiphany for me. I was like, oh my God, like I'm not supposed to clean it like that. No one
I mean,
taught
the
me.
vaginal canal, yeah, is an internal structure, right? It's like the throat or something where you wouldn't put soap in, or your nostril. You would not put soap in your nostril, right? You might wash the outside of your nose, but you would not put soap in your nostril. And I think that because it's literally like an internal part of the body. And the vagina is self-cleaning. You never need to put soap into your vagina. You can clean the vulva, the labia, the pubic hair, the all of the external parts can be cleaned with gentle soap and water, or even just water. You don't really need a special
Yeah.
wash for that. But the thing is, these feminine hygiene washes and all, then it would be okay if they were like, here's a gentle wash that you can wash your vulva with if you like. Because I don't know, you just want to like have this product for your vulva, but actually you can just use your body wash or anything else, or just
Mhm.
water,
Right.
and you definitely don't want to put it inside, right? But instead they call them like vaginal wash, and they'll call it like intimate hygiene wash. The words like with these very internal sounding words are used to market the products, and so people end up like literally taking this product like putting it into the canal, which is going to
Understand.
disrupt the vaginal biome.
Right.
Like it's going to, overwashing can even cause bacterial vaginosis, where from too much water being put into the vaginal canal, you disturb the exist. It's like a very how should I say, self-sustaining mechanism that doesn't need too
Mhm.
much intervention. You know what I mean?
Right.
Imagine like
Yeah.
we like I don't know, you know what I mean? If we like put soap and I don't know, scrubbed inside
Like
our
inside our
noses or
eyes.
inside, inside,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
interesting.
And these are the conversations that you would never have with your gynecologist in India. Like she would never educate most of the times. Like you're not supposed to clean it like that. my first vaginal wash was given to me by my gynecologist. Okay, so now we're gonna move towards the last section, which is the advice round, which is more like a rapid fire. It's like kind of treated like coffee with current rapid fire, minus the hamper because we are very low budget right now. Maybe in future. Okay, so my first question for the rapid fire for you. A lot of my friends have never masturbated, even though they are sexually active for years. So, where should they start? Is there like any porn that women can search, or like, where they're not just getting banged up like their sexual object or something?
So I mean, there's like a bunch of feminist pornographers making what is now being called ethical porn, and porn that's trying to sort of mitigate many of the problems with mainstream porn, and it tends to be porn that you need to pay for because how else are people in porn going to be compensated equitably, etc.
Right.
With a
Yep.
focus on more gender equal pleasure. Da 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 da. There's also audio porn. There's you know all kinds of erotica online if you look for it, and some of it can be quite interesting. But I personally am a big fan of like using my imagination. I don't know, like watching porn, watching sport, like I don't watching other people have fun is like I want to have fun. I
Yeah.
don't want to watch other people have fun. But that's just me. Many people really love erotic media. But I think that so there's no right way to do. What I meant was you have to watch porn. If you don't want, if porn doesn't do anything for you, do it without porn. I think what can really help if you're wanting to begin to explore your own pleasure is to first just look at your vulva with a hand mirror, because it's hard to like actually take a look at what's going on over there, right? Many of us haven't
Right.
actually like seen it. It's located in such a way where we don't just see it every day. The way like if I guess if you have a penis, like when you pee, you kind of get to take a little look. But
Okay.
because of the way that it is located and structured, it's kind of like you really have to sit down with like maybe like some bright lights on or a little lamp and a hand mirror, take a proper look so so you realize what's what. I mean, many people are like shocked to learn that they don't urinate and menstruate from the same opening. They have two openings.
Exactly.
Figuring out what's what, if you haven't already, is a great first step. And then, like, I mean, some people find a basic vibrator to be like a life-changing device. Just
Hmm.
like vibration, the sensation of vibration on the clitoris, it doesn't even have to be something that is a penetrative tool. Literally like a small, like a wand vibrator, a clitoral suction toy or bullet vibrator can be quite like, whoa, I didn't even realize how easy it is to orgasm for many people who use it for the first time. But you could use your fingers or I mean, like whatever pace and your whatever sort of comfort level you're at is a good place to start, right? And even just like being comfortable with being naked. Sometimes we can be so self-conscious about our own bodies. Like for the longest time, I had such insecurity around having small boobs. And like over the years, I've grown to really feel much more comfortable in my skin and much more at peace with and kind of like joyful in the body that I have. It's my body. This is the body I have. Like I might as well learn to enjoy inhabiting this body because otherwise, like life isn't a lot of fun. So I
Right.
feel like those processes also help in ensuring that your sexual experiences, whether solo or with a partner, are more pleasurable. Like it's hard to get out of your head sometimes if you're, I don't know, like uncomfortable with how you look naked or conscious of like various other things instead of being able to be present and like really connect with your own pleasure. So yeah, I would say like take it slow, take
Mhm.
it, or take it at a pace that feels right for you. There's no formula, but at least informing yourself about what's what and then feeling around to see what feels good for you, is a good place to start. And many people have like different ways they like, there is no right way, there's no one single right way, to experience pleasure. But I think like setting aside the time to go on that journey of self-discovery is very worthwhile because it does take time. It doesn't just happen by magic.
Right.
It's like something you can learn. Yeah.
So when we were in college, we both went to Purdue in America, and I was in Boston, and she was in India. She had just moved back to India, and she left her dildo at her aunt's place at one of her relatives' place in Philly. And then she calls me. She's like, Mama, you have to go to Philly for a day. And I'm like, why? She's like, I'm booking your tickets. They're $200. I need to get, like, my aunt is trying to take all my clothes, like, pack my stuff, but she cannot see my dildo. So you need to go pack my stuff and throw that dildo away because otherwise I don't know how embarrassing this would be. And
Okay.
I did it. I flew for 8 hours just to throw a dildo away.
Lisa,
What are
that
friends for,
dildo
I
was
guess.
a
Oh my God.
dildo. It wasn't a
Mm.
wand. It was like a purple penis that was 8 inches long. If someone saw that, they would think
Look
I'm
at my face.
insane. So it had to be. But no, now I have a very nice,
Oh
like,
my
little
God.
wand vibrator that I absolutely love. And like you said, just that little vibration is like more than enough to, and I was like, is this all it takes for me to orgasm? And suddenly this
Right?
thing that was so inaccessible and such a, oh, like, oh, it happens sometimes became like, oh, I can make this happen whenever I wanted to. So it's very empowering in that sense for me to do that self discovery. So, like you said, it's not just about that peak, it's just about like liking your body in a different way and experiencing it in a different way. Which
And for
brings me,
me,
sorry, go ahead.
no, go on. No, for me, like for me, I'm on the other spectrum because I have never used a dildo in my life, but I still like enjoy sex and I still like use my fingers to do it, and it's pretty good. So I've never really experienced it, but after talking to you both, and especially Lisa, you like how you just put up the stories, I think I might try. Like I don't know, maybe yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
I'm missing out on
I feel like
something.
different people like different types of toys,
Yeah.
and I think many people assume when they first think of sex toys that sex toys exist only for women, and that like a phallic looking object is like the sex toy, like, and while I mean, many people do love dildos, a dildo is like a penis looking, or like at least a long, cylindrical type of thing meant for internal stimulation typically. Whereas at least for me, and I think many people can relate to this as well. The most like, oh my God, like I didn't know that was possible, or like, whoa, that feels so good. It's typically like just vibration on the clitoris or suction on the clitoris. Like, with your finger or with a penis or with a man or whatever, if you've had any kind of sexual penetrative activity, you kind of know what penetration feels like. And with a dildo, you have a lot of control over that, but it's kind of like penetration. You know what I mean? But the sensation of vibration is so unique and not possible for a human to recreate, right? It's
Hmm.
just impossible to move up. So you don't even expect for, I mean, I think that it's not a competition between a man and a
Right.
vibrator, or between your own fingers and a vibrator. It's more like this additional tool that just like makes life quite exciting and fun. Like one more, it's like technology that exists, right? It's like a really fun technology that makes a certain sensation really easy to access because of the speed, consistency, and like duration for which it can retain that very, very powerful movement, right? And it's amazing. I mean, why not use, it's like, why would you not use a calculator if you were an accountant? You're not going to be threatened by the
Chat
calculator. It's like
GPT.
this.
It's Chat
Oh,
GPT for the pussy. So I have a very interesting question that someone asked me, and they said that I love having sex with my partner, but when I'm about to finish, I like thinking of someone else. So is this something? I know it's such a personal thing, and I was like, I mean, he doesn't know what you're thinking about, but like there's this little sense of guilt. Am I allowed to think or fantasize about other people when I'm in a sexual interaction with someone?
I mean, there is no, who am I to tell you what you're allowed to or not allowed to do, right? And I feel like it's very, I mean, I'm sure you're not the only person who's ever had this sort of like mind space. I think
Right.
we would be lying if any of us were to say that that even though we've been in a very long monogamous relationship, we have never felt attracted to someone else or never thought of it. You don't have like full control over your thoughts. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
like your imagination and fantasies can go in different directions, and that's okay. And I
Right.
guess, you do have the choice though to act on or not act on certain thoughts or fantasies or whatever it is. And depending on the structure of your relationship, I mean, if you were, for example, in an ethically non-monogamous situation, or where you are practicing polyamory with the consent of all partners involved, maybe, I mean, maybe your partner would even like to hear about that fantasy. I don't, but maybe if you're in a traditionally monogamous relationship, they'd be really upset to hear that or something. So I mean, I don't know, I personally think that lots of the expectations around monogamy, even if for practical purposes you want to just be with one person, I think like many of these ideas of like the one, or you're never allowed to have any sense of attraction to anyone else ever again because we're married now. It's just like that's nice. Have that fairy tale in your head, but it's just not how life works. Like,
Hmm.
who are we? You know what I mean? I think
Right.
that some of it is like delusional. There's delusions around monogamy, even for those of us who practice it, that I think we'd be better off letting go of. Like, yes, we are in a monogamous relationship because that's what we've chosen, and we're being transparent about our expectations and commitment to each other. But am I never going to ever look at someone and think, oh, that they're hot? Like, that would be a lie, right? It's we're not no longer capable of like when we're still human beings with like senses. You can't always control how you perceive something, right? Just like this, objectively speaking, if something is attractive to you, you're going to like perceive it as attractive. You never don't have to act on it, right? That's where the sense of commitment or agency comes in. You don't have to act on everything you
Right.
think. But I mean, should you feel bad about just thinking a thought or feeling a feeling? I don't know. I think that we don't need to be that harsh on ourselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I won't feel
Yeah,
bad next
yeah.
time. So, since we're at time, I just want to ask you our final question. First of all, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. I think it went in directions that we ourselves had not planned in, and that I know will be very beneficial to all the young listeners on our podcast. But this is a very community empowered podcast, and we started this episode talking about how you had the courage and the vision to, start talking about these things that are so inherently taboo in our society. And a friend of mine was talking to me how when she talks to men about these things, when she's open to men about, or like her other partners about these type of things, she's met with a lot of discomfort, even from the male aspect, where men feel demasculated somehow, and also from the female aspect, when women feel like, oh my God, you're so orgasm hungry, and they feel like it's wrong to want something like that. So how might we, like how you are doing this for all of these, this large amount of people, how might people like me and Mahima lead these conversations in our friend groups and with our nieces and nephews, to make sure that we all grow up in a more sex positive society, and we can carry off, all the good work that you do and disseminate it into our own little communities everywhere.
Well, it looks like you already are with this podcast. And I think that, and it just feels normal, right? Like it's not the biggest deal in the world that we're talking about
Yeah.
sex right now. I feel like people are often like, something is so built up in their heads as a taboo that they expect that when you're going to talk about it, like all of us are going to be giggling or like, sex, it's just like sex, whatever. So I think sometimes it can be like surprising to people who haven't yet overcome their own discomfort or awkwardness around something. Just seeing other people like talk about it normally, like, oh, okay, I can talk about sex the way I talk about a recipe or a movie or the weather or something that's like, not a
Yeah.
big deal to talk about and yet important that we talk about. And also giving accurate information. When young people ask questions, and young people do, whether it's your niece or little sibling, whatever it is, often adults will give like complete fairy tales as answers or punish them for asking the question, like how
Yeah.
big, never ask that question again, and I think both a lie and a punishment are going to give off the message that this is this bad thing that we don't talk about, like that you shouldn't ask about, or that like you shouldn't know about. You know what I mean? And that does two things. One, inculcates shame. Two, makes the kid even more curious. So, I mean, then they're going to learn from much less reliable sources, most likely, because what do young people do when they don't know something and nobody's telling them? They go to the internet, and what's much
Right.
easier to find on the internet than like sex positive content, etc. Yeah, like mainstream porn, like the most mainstream porn, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, and that's like learning about sex from like super mainstream free porn is like learning to drive by watching The Fast and the Furious or something. Like just
Yeah.
not a very realistic reference point, right? So I feel just like making it feel safe, comfortable, and normal to talk about this stuff, and like also trying to be as scientifically accurate and judgment free in the tone and responses that you provide. And things can be age appropriate as well, right? I'm not saying you have to inundate like your 5-year-old relative with all the information all in one go. But if they ask a question, or if they happen to see your dogs, for example, doing stuff like, those are all moments where kids have questions. Where do babies come from? Or what are they doing? And I feel like you can give simple but scientific answers instead of like making some stuff up.
Yeah.
My mom told me when I asked her where babies come from, I still remember कि सूरज देवता ने मेरे पेट में डाल दिया बच्चा. Like she was like doing puja, and then someone like, Mom, don't
Imagine
think
going to your
about
dad
it.
and be like, "ये सूरज अंकल कौन है? बताना जरा." Anyway,
Yeah.
Leeza, thank you so much for your time this morning. This was such an amazing, amazing experience for us. We're so excited for everyone to listen to it.
Thanks so much. It was lovely talking to you both. And I'm sorry, did you say there was rapid fire and I just gave like some one answer? I'm so sorry. You said rapid fire. I was like,
don't worry about
No.
thank you. It was so nice meeting you guys. Have a really
You
good
guys
day.
too.
And
You
You
too.
I hope
too.
to see you soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.